Greetings. Many of you know me as the editor of Back to Facts. I am Tatiana Prophet. I'm an award-winning journalist. I think my lens is dirty. Is that better? Yeah. I'm an award-winning journalist, and I'm working for myself now. And I could be doing a lot of small stories right now in the area about just local businesses and things, but instead I'm focusing on it. Matters of national importance, because I feel I have a contribution to the national scene and what is going on right now. Not only because I am a journalist, but because I have taken a political journey that is unusual and has given me a view into and a glimpse into kind of the underbelly, if you will, of politics. Not exactly through first-hand knowledge, but simply through very intense observation from both sides, which is helping inform what is actually going on and the language that people use and the items that are omitted from news articles of national importance and the items that mainstream media will not touch, and just the whole pattern of wars and the whole pattern of drug cartels, immigration, our interference in other countries, especially Latin America, the idea of free trade and why free trade is not always fair, most of the time, many times not fair, and also the idea that the United States and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund essentially dictate to others through financial need and financial distress how they should be running their country. And so I saw that from the left, and now I'm seeing it from the center, but many on the right are also seeing it. I don't see anyone on here at all. Thought you guys were gonna join me. I had put a notice out. Oh, there you are. Whoever that is, give us a like and an angry face or a heart, and I'll give you a shout out. I can't see who you are right now though. So anyway, I hope everybody's sheltering in place at home and only going out for absolute essentials. Wow, there's a lot of cars at the beach. Hopefully they're practicing social distancing or just enjoying the view. So let's get back to the whole political thing. All right, that person left. Basically, we are in an unprecedented time in our lifetimes, and it does bring to mind the Great Wars, World War II and World War I. It brings the issues that affect our country and our globe much closer to home for many of us Americans who have enjoyed prosperity for so very, very long, in a way that it afforded us the luxury of not watching the news and paying attention. I've always paid attention. Okay, good. I've always paid attention. I was a news junkie. I was a journalism major at the Medill School of Journalism. We used to have a current events quiz every morning in our classes. And we also learned how to write on manual typewriters. Fun, fun. You get an F if you misspell something. Automatic fail. So, yes, this is an unprecedented time where everyone is having to pay attention to the same thing, which is very odd because, hi Eileen, hi Sandra, welcome. I've gone over a few things, just my background and how I've had a really unique opportunity Oh, thank you. A unique opportunity to observe current events and news from a very, very young age, the age of 7, believe it or not. And I've cataloged everything in my mind, which has a very strong and keen memory, thank the Lord. And so I've seen world events from many different points of view. And I was saying that I've seen the concept of free trade, the concept of our wars, the concept of immigration, drug cartels, our interference in Latin America, our interference through the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to dictate to other countries how they should run their countries. And because of this unique glimpse that I have afforded myself, I feel like I understand a lot of what's going on, and frankly, it's not very comforting. We enjoyed great prosperity in the 90s and the early 2000s, even 9/11, and in spite of spending billions and billions and billions overseas in these wars after 9/11. So, I take and feel all of these things very, very deeply, no matter what my political persuasion has been. And many of you know that I famously supported Hillary Clinton because I thought of myself as a moderate. And I loved Obama, and I just I liked his speeches he gave before he won. And sure, there were a lot of uncomfortable things that we went through under Obama, and he had a difficult hand dealt to him. But I ultimately started really taking a more critical look right after Hillary lost, and watching closely the Obama White House to see, now, what is this all about? And what does leadership look like? And what is possible in our world? And what are we not being told? Because it almost seems like these problems just go on endlessly and endlessly and endlessly, in spite of there being so much prosperity available to the wealthy in every country. Why? Why is this happening? Why does it always seem like such a thorny mess? So, I think the first thing that clued me in to the whole situation with Barack Obama was the war in Syria. And I will say that in Libya, which we also invaded, but went much quicker, in Libya, the whole Benghazi situation on September 11th, 2012, I guess, because it was an election year, really was like the match that struck my whole observation of our involvement over there, which I was not happy with in Iraq 10 years earlier either, or 7 years earlier, whatnot. So, and I started to watch him in some of his very last press conferences, and having so much trouble talking about Syria. I see that with Trump now too. I feel like he can't say too much, so I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, much to the consternation of most people who know me. It's probably because I had two parents who were public figures, and I saw how the media made snap judgments and weren't even curious to understand what they were really about. And I thought, that is not right. They don't know this person, neither are they trying to understand how they think and what they are doing. Hi, Eileen. Yes, thank you. We're fine. He is home with his dad, and they're playing, and I cleaned the whole house from top to bottom. I scoured it with Pine Sol, which kills 99.9% of viruses and germs. I also have bleach. I couldn't get any Lysol. The stores were all out. But anyway, so I started putting puzzle pieces together, and back to Benghazi for a second. Oh, only one person watching now, huh? So back to Benghazi for a second. September 2012. The nation feels like we're doing okay. Jobs are coming back slowly. We definitely wanted Obama reelected. I did, because as far as I was concerned, Republicans just were out of touch, completely out of touch with women and mothers and what we need to be able to participate in society. And I thought they were out of touch about healthcare. And so I was very happy when Obama narrowly won re-election. Also, the killing of Osama bin Laden was odd to me. First of all, I never celebrate when anyone dies, but just that whole thing, it seemed so fake and hollow in a way. Like, we waited that long. We know where everyone is. It's just a matter of not wanting to step on the toes of the governments in those areas. But it was right before the election that it was earlier in that year that Osama bin Laden was killed. And then Benghazi. Okay, so we have Ambassador Christopher Stevens, who's the ambassador to Tripoli, Libya. And we had a smaller building in Benghazi, Libya, in a different part of the country. And he traveled there for a couple nights for unknown duties, and he had already expressed concern that there wasn't enough security for the ambassador and attaches and the whole State Department delegation over there. But that wasn't, we were all trying to place blame. Republicans cut aid to the embassies, and just like we tried to place blame for the 2008 housing debacle. Barney Frank, Bill Clinton, bipartisan people wanting us to rev up the economy by giving loans to people who probably shouldn't be getting them, rather than trying to raise wages like they should have. So what I'm saying is, I spend an awful lot of time thinking about why politicians do what they do, what they're ignoring, and then I get a framework. And the fact is, sadly, I'm Generation X, and we're the first generation to be doing worse than our parents. And so this downturn right now due to novel coronavirus is particularly painful for me and those younger than me, because what made America great, even though we had segregation and we had evil among us, the general public was not evil and stood up for everyone regardless of color. But what made America great was that we took care of our middle class. It wasn't socialism. It was thinking, being competent, offering the GI Bill, not coming up with some flim-flam for people to qualify for housing loans, but actually having good jobs for them, making things. The whole auto industry is the one that started these pensions for life. That is a tremendous expense, a pension. All of these sweetheart deals designed to attract talent. And that was because we were being run at that point like a business. We had just got done making all these chips and weapons and armaments for World War II. And now we started making things for the American people. So, yes, all was not right in America. There was a decided strain of people who were trying to put down our African American population, no question about it. And there are still these closet racists everywhere. Personally, I don't think they're Trump supporters. I think they are the establishment and the powers that be. They secretly think they can't handle the black population they secretly are afraid, just like slavers were afraid. If they ever lost control, if they ever let up with their violence just a little bit, they would be killed, they would be unmasked, they would be exposed, they would lose everything. Their power, their grip, their control. And so, I think the reason people like Hillary Clinton and others talk about racism and identity politics so much is that in their heart of hearts, they really can't imagine our black citizens, black Americans, truly having such an extraordinary talent, and often in so many areas they don't need special treatment. They want to be proud of their work. As far as I can tell, I don't speak for black Americans, but as far as I can tell, I think humanity, the common theme in all humans is we would like to feel that we are making a difference. And we would like to think of new ideas and ways to make a difference. And so we say, how did we fall so far? How did we get to the point where we're not taking care of our middle class, where Generation X, myself and others, have suffered greatly with these recessions? And the fact that there were really very few good jobs. Every time I graduated from something and was about to start off and launch a career, there were no jobs. And the wages were horrific. You couldn't get by. If you wanted to do anything to make a difference, you had to have a family supporting you or a spouse. I mean, that's been true, I think, for people. Men always need a wife if they're going to go to law school or whatever, they need some support. Well, that means that those of humble means are probably not going to go into the psychology field, which is what I was doing, but there was no way I could sustain that on my own. Getting $8 an hour, just back in 1999, 2000, while paying a psychiatrist to supervise me and paying for my own therapy. Not possible. So we've all suffered. Some of us have done better than others. We've made better choices. We've gone into sales maybe, but those of us who are artists and writers, it's been devastating for decades. And so I know a lot of people who feel the same way, and then millennials, it got even worse. And so let's come back around to Barack Obama. Yes, he made an effort to improve the economy. He talked about wages, and yet there was this other hand over here, and it wasn't just Obama's hand, it was the hand of the establishment doing all these trade deals that were always for the benefit of the people in power. Free trade is not fair trade, not necessarily. So I find it really funny that, remember those, whenever they would have like a G8 summit anywhere in the world, there was one in Vancouver, I think, and different places. Remember all of those protesters? Remember that in the late 90s? And there were some people who were kind of like, what is the deal, man? These, like communists or degenerates or what's going on? And then it turned into Occupy Wall Street and all that. There was no way that the liberal establishment, quote, they're not liberal. I put quotes down around liberal, Obama, Hillary. Sorry, my shirt's too small, but I love the color, so I pinned it. Anyway, there was no way that the liberal, I'll call them neoliberal establishment, was going to allow the Occupy movement to achieve anything. You remember the media? They would say, what do they want? Oh, I don't know. I could not imagine what they want. But, as we see, trade had a direct effect on our jobs here and the quality of our jobs. And it just pretty much got worse and worse in spite of any recovery. Few exceptions were the dot-com boom. Of course, there was a bust also because people were just throwing money at it. But for the most part, I and my cohorts of the same generation feel like if we make an honest living, we're not going to be able to have a family and a home. I mean, I've been waiting, working hard for that eventuality. And it's almost like you have to just like, you got to get your situation set up, but it takes a lot of ingenuity and cutting corners. And instead of just making making that good living and a good job you can be proud of and that you enjoy. If you want to help people, you got to have a whole family behind you while you get licensed. You know, it's not easy anymore. Back in the day, a breadwinner could go to his job, and it could be anything. It could be something, you know, maybe a garbage man or something, and still have enough money to get a humble house or something. Now it's impossible. And then we have all these corporate jobs, but the wages have not gone up. And finally, they were going up before this recession. So I am talking about why I finally realized that Barack Obama had no interest in really improving my life, the lives of Generation X, the lives of people living in very difficult circumstances. And that really was a big realization in 2016. And I'll just go back to trade. So under Bill Clinton, the United States and other big countries, I guess the G8, we let China into the World Trade Organization. And they got most favored nation status, which just means that we will treat you like our allies in trade, I believe. And then somehow a deal was also cut, maybe just through China devaluing their currency so much that it was cheaper to make stuff over there. Where, as we all know, you know, you go to Target and all of a sudden, I mean, not a single thing is made out of China. I mean, maybe once in a while Vietnam, you're like, oh, Vietnam, cool. You know, but mostly China. I mean, I actually made a living writing about logistics, writing about the ports and what a big deal it was to have a deep water port to be able to receive all those shipping containers. And the port of Savannah is like a major port for the entire East Coast. Port of Long Beach is that for the West Coast. There's a huge port in Mexico. So when I was covering that in the early 2000s for a business paper, Atlanta Business Chronicle, I didn't necessarily see the implications for the American people because I had always lived in cities. And I really hadn't familiarized myself. Like, I needed to look at a good book of data, you know, about just how many things we used to make, you know. And then when the Great Recession happened, I had to leave. I left journalism to pursue music, and then it was a terrible time realizing that I needed to get a job again. But I noticed that the last furniture factory closed up in, I think, about 2009, 2010. The last furniture factory, I think it was in North Carolina. And as well as flooring, wood flooring, wood laminate. The last piece of wood laminate was made in the United States in about 2010, 2012. Drywall and all of this. And I also knew because I was working in a contracting business at that point, thank goodness I got a job. But the flooring, even now, that we are putting in our buildings, it's not really up to code as far as like flammability and stuff. It's just the planning departments just kind of like overlook it. If you go in and you start looking at the data sheet and all that, you can see that there's really nothing that we can buy for a decent price if you're a business owner that is actually up to code for United States or local buildings and things standards. So, you know, you just go, why? Where's the quality anymore? Where is, you know, Chinese consumers, they want to buy something quality. I wrote for China Daily, in 2009 and 2010. And that was because I couldn't get a writing job anywhere else, so I was freelancing. And they had money, and I thought, well, I'll see what this, I'll just see what my experience is. And I read about other Westerners' experience writing for the Chinese government. Yeah, I actually got paid by the Chinese Communist Party for a little while, and met Yao Ming at a dinner. They thought I was like staff correspondent, and so they gave me a standing ovation, but by the time the dinner was over, they realized I didn't speak Chinese and I was only freelance, so I let myself out. True story, okay? But be that as it may, I learned a lot also covering China, because one of my first pieces was I had gone to a business conference about, doing business in China and things. This was in Dana Point, California, in Orange County. And I decided I was going to write about the Chinese consumer. And believe it or not, the Chinese consumer is very discriminating. Okay, they're making this stuff for planned obsolescence, first of all, which is a real thing, so that it'll break and you have to buy more. Everything is just disposable now. I mean, I've had toys break the day I brought them home. I mean, it's very disheartening. So what I'm looking at it as is, you hear made in China and people are like, made in China. Is nothing about China inherently. China is a proud and beautiful country and formidable. It is about control by those who don't have national allegiances. So, remember TPP? I mean, Obama was pushing that through. I tried to support it because I was like trying to wrap my mind around it. I still liked Obama. That was just going to make things worse. I mean, they say that he was requiring better labor standards over there and stuff, but, there's one thing I learned in this whole journey is there's the law, and then there's enforcement of the law. So, you can talk about whatever, but if you don't have adequate enforcement, things are just going to go on as usual. And let me tell you something. The wealthy who have no allegiance to any country, they're not looking out for that country's interests. Therefore, they're not negotiating from a place of intelligence. They're negotiating from a place of who is going to help me stay in power. And I'm going to do that for them. And it's hard for us to even believe something like this. It's very hard because many of our leaders, not all, do not think the way that we do. They don't have our morals and our values. So back to the middle class. I'm absolutely devastated at what's happening to our economy. Many people who have small businesses, they only have 2 more weeks before they're going to have to close their doors, because I know one person said that their landlord, they asked for a break and the landlord said no. Perhaps he's also close to the line. I mean, most businesses have to keep a very sharp eye on their reserves. They have to have big tax bills, and they have to watch out for that. And they have rent, which in many cases is extremely high. So this is really, really devastating, and I think it's more devastating right now because of the abuse of our generation that has already occurred, and it is such an injustice to me that it makes me want to vomit. I have had former classmates of mine from school, some my age, some younger, some older, who have tried to say that I am negligent, incompetent, I'm not a journalist, simply because I've been talking about cures for the novel coronavirus. And before things got really bad, I said in February, I started doing research on any type of potential therapy. I was so not paying attention when the Ebola outbreak happened in, I think, 2014, that all we thought about is like vaccine. But I've done a lot of research now on vaccines, and it's like, well, first of all, they take a whole season to develop. Second of all, they don't always know how it's going to mutate. And third of all, there are things that you can do to build up your immune system where no virus can actually do you in. With caveats, of course. This is a very, very nasty virus. I finally have someone I know personally who had it. Although, I must say, she said she's better now. And I'm so thrilled. She's not super young, so about 10 years older than me. And I was worried, very, very worried. And she said it was nasty. Very nasty. And, that picture that you see, some of those are artist conceptions of what it looks like, and then others are actual nano photographs that have been colorized. So, now, they really do have those spindles in them that hook onto cells. So we're dealing with something that is next level. And I will say that I was a little bit in denial in the beginning. I mean, who wants to shut down your whole country? Who wants to live in fear? None of us. And then, of course, with this tremendously politicized environment in our country with the impeachment process happening, we weren't doing our best. We rarely are when we politicize things. And so, fighting. I had a family friend, or a family of my friend, write me this morning and ask me to explain my, quote, support of President Trump. And as I've always maintained, I'm just fair to him. It's hard to treat everyone equally, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's hard to work through your bias and treat everyone equally. But, yes, I am fair to him, and I am going to look at the good that he's done, and I'm going to see the unforced errors that make me go, oh, why? But, with everything I was watching, he was one of the only people who was really talking about this great loss of any type of quality job. And the loss even further of in our inner cities where factories had already left. So I'll just try to articulate it quickly because I have something I need to take care of. But so why am I fair to Trump? Well, number one, I think one of his greatest accomplishments, aside from getting us out of this situation, will be talking about how much money we send over and give to other countries. In the 90s, this used to be a popular notion that the money that we send over to other countries and fighting wars, why aren't we helping our own people in our inner cities? And then that was a liberal talking point for a long time, actually. And I can remember being like, well, if they paid attention to foreign policy, they would see that it's, it's important to help other countries, But then I started looking to USAID. USAID is a corrupt organization. It is a part of the State Department, I believe, and it is the agency that distributes money around the world. USAID has so much waste and corruption, and they send money to do a lot of things that we don't do for our own people, such as small business loans. Yes. Now, of course we should have some responsibility in the world. Of course. However, it's a corrupt system. If you look at the countries where we send money, are they any better? No, they're not. Like pretty much across the board. So he started talking about that. And because of all the research that I had done, I was like, oh my God. I mean, I didn't like him at first. I don't like rich people. And I certainly don't like, okay, I don't like flashy, wealthy people who flaunt their wealth, even like celebrities, it pisses me off because of what's happened to Generation X and millennials. But, so I didn't really have a great impression of him, but I started watching the debates, and when he challenged Jeb Bush on his brother's conduct, starting that war, the Iraq war, something did change in me. And because these issues have been ignored for so long and increased. The wars increased under Obama. Benghazi was a huge failure, and there was a cover-up. He was there, most likely running weapons to Syria from Gaddafi's storehouse. And of course, optics. I remember someone who was really mad about Benghazi still, and going, it wasn't a video. It wasn't over a video. It wasn't a protest. You know, Susan Rice lied on the Sunday talk shows, and I'm like, why are you still talking about that it wasn't over a video? And he said, because they were trying to say that Al-Qaeda was no longer a problem. And I'm like, really? I mean, who would say that? You know, I never ever thought that with Osama bin Laden dead, that Al-Qaeda was not a problem at all. Ridiculous. Absolutely preposterous. The guy was past his prime, well past his prime. I mean, really? Is that what people thought? I don't know. But, so I did not realize how much everything about Obama and Hillary was about optics. For instance, I actually had to research this tidbit about Haiti because not only did she bungle Haiti aid by, you know, basically giving her husband and her brother exclusive access to the aid giving, but she also successfully got the minimum wage hike for Haitian workers to fail. It was like 36 cents a day, and they wanted to go up to like still less than $1 a day. Now, mind you, they have an exchange rate, so it's really hard to kind of compare, but at the same time, that's the purchasing power parity, you know, that they have. So, when I saw that she did that for our factories in Haiti, Fruit of the Loom and Nike, I thought to myself, wow, okay. Wow, okay, so this person is, I'm projecting onto this person what I think a strong woman should be. Straight up. And I'm not even embarrassed, you know. I've had friends who are very angry at me and don't listen to a word I say or read a word that I write. Tell me that I must be compensating for my support of Clinton in 2016. No, not overcompensating. I'm looking for the truth. Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? I mean, when I say these things about why I'm fair to Trump, I back it up with information, always. So, back to being fair to Trump. So, he was saying the things about the American worker and about trade that no one else was saying, except for Bernie Sanders. Fortunately, Bernie Sanders pretty much says the same thing every single speech, that we have plenty of billionaires and there's plenty of money in this country to take care of everybody. Well, yes, Bernie, but it's the system, the freedom to invent and use our talents, coupled with a very good safety net. And I also, for mothers, for working mothers, absolutely. No question about it. The safety net just needs to be smart. Just needs to be not wasteful. But if we just give money to everybody, like the UBI, Universal Basic Income, and other such things, and we never talk about them having taking pride in their work, that's a red flag to me. Because I was watching PJ O'Rourke last night, and it was a special on Andrew Yang. And PJ O'Rourke, who most people know is a conservative humor writer, I think he's from Florida, he said, if we had had UBI back in the 60s when I was coming up, he said, I probably would have just joined a commune, gotten stoned, and stayed there. He said I wouldn't have become who I am. I wouldn't have written books. And you know what? It's true. It's very true, especially for young people. You know, I wish that my parents had... I wanted to go to work when I was 12. I wanted a summer job. And I guess I needed to be 14. And I did work in the community, but I didn't see the money exchanging hands. And it was a commune. So, I mean... this is the thing with Bernie and AOC. It's that there's no accountability. There's no personal responsibility. There's just, we have enough money in this country to give it to everybody. And of course, I'm simplifying it. But anyway, now why did I decide Republicans are actually not out of touch? Because I saw them in action. I know many, many people, Republicans and Democrats, who would never, ever go into debt or go bankrupt. They would always pay their way. Personal responsibility, no matter what. Work 3 jobs. By the way, I worked 2 jobs, but it still wasn't enough to continue with my my master's in psychology follow-up for licensure. So anyway, there's a sense of personal responsibility that is missing from the neoliberal line, and it's really unfortunate because it's pandering. And so now I don't believe that Republicans are out of touch, but I believe they have, well, more than half the story right now. You know, the rightness of people being correct about truth, it shifts from party to party as far as I'm concerned. In the early 2000s, I do believe the peaceniks were right. They were much more aware of what was going on and much more apt to criticize George W. Bush. Fast forward, and they're like saying that they wish that we could have the decorum back from his tenure. Just disgusting. So back to Jeb Bush and Donald Trump. Donald Trump just chewed out Jeb Bush for what they did in Iraq. And I was like, then about all the money we send overseas and about our funding of NATO. Our funding of NATO is greater than anyone else's, and our paying for our bases in Japan and overseas and all that, sure, it gives us control, but at a very, very high price. It's almost as if on a global scale, we don't trust people to be able to look out for their own interests, kind of like neoliberals do when they pander to Black Americans. We don't trust other countries to provide for their common defense. Sure, we had to take care of it after World War II. But I bet you there were a lot of pockets lined with that Marshall Plan. So we have very dishonest people running things, and we've never realized it. Because I frankly didn't think there were so many people who flouted the law or basic rules of fairness. Journalists, you know, there are amazing journalists all over the country. I am only talking about journalists who deal with matters of national importance, okay? Those are in the Washington soup, and they're often married to people in government. And even if they're not married to people in government, they were raised there often in New York, Washington. They haven't gotten out. They haven't seen what they need to be seeing. I mean, sure, you're supposed to go and be a journalist in a small town, but lately, more recently, that's been bypassed. And even if you do that, you can still kind of go through your tenure there and not really dig into what makes the American people tick. And being in Washington and New York is a bubble. So whether by default, by passivity, and undeserved pride in your own work, or whether deliberately, they push the agenda of the long-term permanent American government. And I know this to be true from many sources. So seeing all that, I said, Trump is not one of them. He's not. And he's been saying the same thing since the 80s about the money that we spend overseas to basically pander to these countries in exchange for our control of them. It's like we have vassal states. And you think I'm wrong? Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. All their economies, the biggest part of their economies is remittances from undocumented immigrants who work here. They send their money home, and that props up their economies. This is not a criticism of them at all. It's a criticism of us. We hold them as vassals to us. Hillary Clinton letting her buddies go into Latin America for their natural resources and take it for the multinational corporations. Yeah, So it was very difficult for me to admit this stuff. I researched Haiti even before the 2016 election, and I was absolutely horrified. You know what they did? You know where their money went, the Clinton Foundation money, to Haiti? It didn't go to Port-au-Prince, which is where the earthquake had happened. It went to the north, where they were building some factory. They were building like a factory complex to help rev their economy up, and they were going to bring in Asian workers from Korea and different places. Yeah. Why? It makes no sense. That's not a help. So again, the people that I've observed doing these things do not think like us. No, they don't. It's sad. It's really sad. And then when I realized that, and I saw her, stating platitudes about women, and when human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights, I was already bored with her and going, come on, get it together, Why do you keep saying the same thing all the time and not answering the questions? But when I finally realized what she had done, and then I was listening to her talk, and ever since the election, I'm more than disgusted, because you have to make an effort to gloss over the real issues. You have to make an effort to pretend like you care. Okay, now, so Trump was right on about NATO, and the more the media, the establishment media, and the Washington political media, the more they crowed about what is he talking about? What's he talking about? We don't pay for these countries' troops. No, it is that it all goes into a pot, and we pay more of our gross domestic product than any other nation. Now they're starting to pay. Oh, wow. Well, if he was talking about nothing, that was not a problem, then why is the problem solved? Why is it that Jens Stoltenberg, former Prime Minister of Norway, who is now the Secretary General of NATO in Brussels, why does he like Trump so much? Why is he so friendly with him? Well, probably because he knows that Trump is the one that signs his checks and that butters his bread. And that's also why you see a lot of people, world leaders liking Trump. But Jens Stoltenberg has gotten along with Trump great. And the countries have stepped up. And perhaps, hopefully, they're dealing with trying to rein in corruption and waste, but for real. Okay, that is the main achievement that I think Trump will be known for, is making us all aware of the waste and the fraud and the corruption that goes on with our aid abroad, including NATO. Second of all, he does not pander to the point where people think he's racist. He doesn't pander ever. If somebody does something that isn't true or isn't right, he will call them out. He will give them nicknames equally. Women, Black Americans, men, Asians. And it's funny too, the media exposes their bias, because they never talk about the woman of color who's the first Marine general. And they never talk about our Surgeon General, who is a man of color and so well spoken. Oh, surprise! No, not surprise. So how do we lift all of our citizens up? Because AOC is talking about how this coronavirus is definitely differentiating along racial lines. People of color, of course, right? She says that. Well, it is. We have employees that I'm trying to get a loan to give them, to make sure that we maintain payroll, or we meet payroll. But people who work in the markets, people who work in my neighborhood market. I live in a rent-controlled neighborhood near the beach, but most people have mansions, and everybody who works in that market drives in from a long, long way away. They don't live there. The teachers who teach in the preschools, they drive in from a long way away, mostly. And they have had to go to work day in, day out. Of course, they need the money, so they're going to go. They're out there on the front lines. And so it does affect lower incomes disproportionately. And so, yes, AOC, you got half the story. What's the other half of the story? The other half of the story is that every single one of our citizens deserves to be trained and to get a good job and to be allowed the privilege of working hard. It's something they can take pride in. It all comes back around to that. Free market isn't perfect, but you have to have enlightened leaders who think critically. High functioning would be the term I would look for. High functioning and honest. So, my heart goes out to everyone who's working right now out there. And, I forgot my mask. I forgot my mask. And my gloves. No, I'm alone at the office, but just have to. I have my hand sanitizer here, spray. Anyway, thank you for watching. I know I was rambling a bit, but I wanted to let everybody know why I think Trump is unique. He is not one of them, and he is an imperfect, very imperfect emissary of the American people. But where it counts, he's doing a great job. And that includes coronavirus. He shut the borders against the advice of everyone. Everyone, sure. Remember that quote about him going, no, it's just one person coming from China. Yeah, I looked into that. So he was at Davos. I think it was like January, 22nd. So it was like the day after the very first patient had been diagnosed, who had flown in from Wuhan, China to Seattle. And by the way, he was treated with one of these therapies I've been talking about forever, remdesivir, and he got better. And that was in the New England Journal of Medicine. Anyway, it was one man from China. And the question to him was, are you worried about this novel coronavirus coming to the United States? At this point? Are you worried at this point? He goes, no. He may have said so far, or it may have been implied, but he said it's one person coming from China. Now, this man is a relentless optimist. If you haven't seen, he follows the Power of Positive Thinking, a book by Norman Vincent Peale. And Norman Vincent Peale was a reverend in the Marble Collegiate Church in Manhattan, which was a church that their entire family went to. And even though everybody says, oh, he's immoral, or whatever, he had 3 wives. Oh my God, he's the first person to get married 3 times. Oh, but Liz Taylor's just great, right? She had 8 husbands. Anyway, he cheated on his first wife, and so he doesn't deserve to have a church that his family went to. See, this is why I say you have to look at the person in their totality. Anyway, Marble Collegiate Church, Norman Vincent Peale, he wrote the book, Power of Positive Thinking, in the 1950s, and they would go and listen to him every Sunday, and he got married in that church to Ivana. And when you hear him talk, his first instinct is to reassure and to declare, almost give an affirmation that this is happening. He offers praise when praise is due. He has praised his political enemies during many a crisis, including the California fires, when he praised Gavin Newsom. And now when he's praising the governors that he is praising. So this man is steeped in this power of positive thinking to the point where I think it can get a little annoying. But when he answered that CNBC reporter in Davos who asked if he was worried about coronavirus, and this was only 2 days after the first patient came from Wuhan, China, he said, the question was, are you worried at this point? And he said, no, it's just one person coming in from China. So if you look at who he is and how he's relentless cheerleader, very positive for the country, you see that that was a moment in time. He didn't say that in February. He didn't say that in March. In fact, in January, he closed the border. He closed our airports to people coming from China. And now we have more cases than anyone, right? Well, I do believe that our country failed and was failed by its permanent government because we didn't have rapid testing. You know, because we didn't have rapid testing, if he hadn't shut down that border, this would be much, much worse, which is really scary. But here's the thing, I've told this other places, rapid testing now, they use antigens in the blood, and they just invented this test using the genome of novel coronavirus. And when I say they, I mean a company in North Carolina called Biomedomics. They invented this test. They worked round the clock after China published the genome of novel coronavirus. They developed this antigen test that only takes 15 minutes. However, even they were also selling the more complicated tests to China, because they said that you really should verify, because the blood tests are only like 69% accurate. And so, long story short, this biomedomics company, based in North Carolina, a research incubator, sold 500,000 test kits to China in January, and about just as many to South Korea. And I can hardly believe it as I'm saying it, but the FDA hadn't approved the tests yet, and they took like a month and a half. This is why I've been talking about the therapies too. You know, I can understand being cautious about a experimental drug under normal circumstances, but the media is now, and social media are now censoring talk of actual therapies that haven't killed anybody. If any, they've had an amazingly tremendous success rate. Now, I've talked about them a lot. Now they've been freed up for more fast-track compassionate use, still not fully approved by the FDA, but the FDA didn't approve the rapid test kit. So here we are criticizing the CDC for there was a shortage of a reagent, and there was a faulty reagent. I look in, and it's just this dinosaur, ancient-ass bureaucratic system that moves like that tank in Star Wars with the Jawas and the robots pieces. And it's like, so what the media does is they say, okay, everybody goes, oh, the CDC screwed up the tests, or Trump screwed up the tests. And Deborah Birx and Anthony Fauci, when they disagree with Trump, they're right. But when they agree with Trump, they're not right. And so we screwed up our tests. No, you know who screwed up the tests? The FDA and our multinational corporations, more concerned with emerging markets in China by their own account, even last fall, talking about diagnostics this and diagnostics that and profit streams and revenue streams. So I believe we need to have more of a public-private partnership in an ethical way. We were not prepared to test the population. That is wrong. Is it Trump's fault? No, it's not Trump's fault. This is a very scientific and complex situation. The only reason I figured it out is that I've done a lot of research into, I've done healthcare reporting. I wanted to be a science writer. So I figured out what the problem was with the testing, because I realized that they were trying to conflate one problem with another. They were conflating these long-term tests that take like 3 days or minimum 24 hours with the blood test. And I had to read a lot of specialized articles and journals about this to finally figure out that it wasn't this hiccup that the CDC had. It was the lumbering slowness of our system that cares more about selling test kits to China than getting it approved for our own people. That should tell you right there, folks. This is a pattern, this is a framework, and that's what woke me up. So, for anyone who wants to understand why I have defended Trump, that's a long answer. So, as soon as the media starts acting normal and covering him even a little bit more fairly, or with actual information that helps us get smarter, rather than the same outrage of we know he makes comments that are hard to interpret. We know everybody gets their panties in a twist. Okay? So until they start doing that, I am going to be the lone voice. But I'm very disappointed, actually, in the coverage that's happened of our president. And it's going to come out even more. Remember that first press conference when he wouldn't let CNN's Jim Acosta ask a question? This was when he was PO'd, President-elect of the United States. And I believe the press conference was somewhere in Trump Tower. And he was talking about divestiture of his businesses and how he wasn't going to officially do it, but he was letting his sons run it and all that. You know what he just heard about before he went out to that press conference? Yeah, the news had just come out in CNN about this fake dossier. The dossier by Christopher Steele that ended up being a bunch of hearsay. The Inspector General of the FBI looked into the whole thing. Number one, the spying on Carter Page and Donald Trump was all pinned on that dossier. And they were lying, media were lying about that. Number two, the dossier, by its admission of the author, was hearsay and hastily compiled for opposition research, right? Doesn't really have to be true, it just has to be out there, right? So this man gets told by James Comey, who is absolutely conducting a coup and sitting there doing an intelligence gathering interview unbeknownst to the president, while telling him there's this dossier, right? Then going and making notes. That is how he went out to that press conference. The injustice of it is coming out now. His relationship with the media was made so much worse by the efforts of disinformation and, frankly, despicable and dastardly weasel moves by the great weasel of them all, James Comey. And he should have told us everything. Is the man who always says the right thing, but then stabs you in the back. I've thought of him as an Iago, the villain from Othello, for a long time, and I finally figured him out. Well, the first warning we got was when he took it upon himself to hold a press conference about dropping charges or not charging Hillary Clinton, when they hadn't even deposed her under oath. And they let her decide which emails to destroy, which ones were private. It was hard for me to admit all this stuff, but when I finally started putting the pieces together, I realized that there have been a lot more injustices than we've been aware of. We've been asleep. And that, my friends, is why I actually admire Trump. And he won't be here forever, but he really does remind me of a general in World War II, specifically Patton. If Patton took the stage and held press conferences today, what do you think the mainstream media would be doing? I don't know. Maybe because Patton had a bunch of medals and stuff, they would treat him differently because he wasn't this maverick with bone spurs. You know, I mean, anytime Trump talks about the military, they talk about bone spurs. How do I justify the bone spurs thing? Well, I'll tell you one thing. It takes guts to defy what everyone is saying. And he's been saying the same thing since the 80s. And so I'm glad he didn't die in Vietnam, actually. I'm really glad. And you know what? Most of our young people knew that that war was stupid. And the poor people did go and sacrifice their lives. Poor people who couldn't get a deferment. Poor people who couldn't get a doctor's excuse. But any person who can contribute to bringing our country to its intended potential and greatness, who was saved from that war, that's a good thing. So, sorry that I went on so long. I think I went on about an hour, but I had a lot to say. I haven't talked to y'all in a while, and it's not because I'm giving in to this virus. I will say it did get worse than I thought it was going to, but I also will say that it's a very unsettling, eerie type of relationship we have right now with the media. I haven't seen many stories inside hospitals because everybody's afraid of getting sick. And I hear that many politicians in the media are trying to announce that young people have tested positive for coronavirus who have died, and then you hear that it was actually the cause of death was something different, and then they had it. But you know, we also believe, and I have many friends who think that they may have already had it and gotten over it before, like, any of this really, before we really realized what we were dealing with, and because we didn't have the antigen tests. See, everything's connected. Remember the name of that company, Biomedomics, and if anybody asks you or talks about how we didn't test, you tell them about Biomedomics from an incubator in North Carolina, and how instead of demanding that the FDA approve their tests, they sold 500,000 tests to China. You can look it up. It's on their website. So may we all get through this, and And I'm very sad for our country right now and for our world. And I know we will get through this. So stay strong for the next 2 weeks. It's going to be a tough 2 weeks. I know that. But the therapies that the mainstream media has been censoring and suppressing, I never thought I'd say anything like that. Those therapies are going to start to make a difference. Okay. Well, nice talking to you all. Yes, I know. Some of you talk about 5G. I know nothing about 5G. I'm sorry. I would have to do a lot of research. And all I can say is if half of what people are saying about 5G is true, then we're just screwed. So, why would I want to say that we're screwed? I just don't. I think there's probably, if you really want to know, I think there's probably a way to go about 5G.